You think cemeteries are just quiet places to visit the dead, but some nights, the dead seem to notice the living. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true creepy cemetery horror stories that will make you question every shadow and every sound after dark. From a whistling spirit to a hovering man by a mausoleum, and a girl in white whose scream comes from nowhere. These tales are not for the faint of heart. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, if you dare, because you won't want to miss the real-life terror we're uncovering tonight. St. Mary's Cemetery isn't big. It's the kind of graveyard you only notice when you're already pulling past it. Tucked between a VFW hall that closed in the 90s and a strip of pawn shops that seem to change names every year. The gates always chain shut, but the fence is low enough you could step over if you wanted. People around here don't. I started walking past it last winter after I picked up a night shift at the diner 2 blocks down. It wasn't anything romantic, just the quickest route home. The place felt smaller in the dark, like the graves pressed closer together, the headstones leaning in on each other like tired men. The first time I noticed the lantern, it was after 2 in the morning. The streetlights cut out halfway down the block, and the only light past that was the orange glow from the hall's busted sign. Except that night, there was something else. A pale glow, bobbing low against the rows of graves. My brain told me it was somebody's phone flashlight, or a kid with one of those little LED camping lamps. But the way it moved, it didn't swing right. The light floated, smooth, too steady for a hand carrying it. I walked faster, head down, until the diner's neon went out of sight behind me. I told myself I imagined it. The next night, it was there again. Same glow, a slow drift among the stones. And this time, I noticed something worse. The gate chain rattling, even though the wind was still. A couple nights later, I mentioned it to Joey, who does prep at the diner. He didn't even let me finish before he said, "Don't look at it," like it was a rule everybody knew. He said when he was a kid, his uncle told him the same thing. Supposedly, the caretaker of St. Mary's used to patrol with a lantern back before the place had streetlights. The story goes, he died out there during a storm, struck down mid-rounds, and his light never went out. Some folks said he was still making his rounds, checking on graves that don't get flowers anymore. I wanted to laugh it off. But then Joey added, "If he catches you watching him, he'll follow you to make sure you're not messing with the dead." That stuck in my head. The next week, I tried to change up my route, but every shortcut circled me back to the same stretch of road. One night, snow flurries were blowing, and I figured visibility would cover me. I made it halfway down when I heard it. Metal scraping, the sound of a chain being dragged slow across pavement. My stomach locked up. The glow appeared between the headstones, brighter this time. It stopped when I stopped, moved when I did. I couldn't see a body holding it, just light moving like it belonged to the fog. I forced myself not to look at it, like Joey said, but then, from the corner of my eye, I swore I saw a shape, a figure tall and thin, shoulders stooped, lantern held at a height lower than it should have been. My boots slipped on the icy sidewalk as I hurried past. The chain rattled louder, like it was being pulled toward me, and when I finally turned the corner, the glow winked out, like it had ducked behind the stones. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the sound, not just the chain, something softer, the deliberate scrape of shoes, each step landing too long after the last. I still take that road sometimes, out of habit or stubbornness, I don't know. The gate's always locked, the grass unkempt, the graves tilting further with each season. But every so often, past midnight, I see it again. The pale glow swaying, steady and patient, watching me without ever getting closer. And I wonder if one night, when I'm too slow, it'll finally step through the fence and decide I need checking on too. I used to work night shifts as a groundskeeper at a cemetery just outside of Kansas City. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid decent. And honestly, I liked the quiet. The cemetery was old, one of those places with sprawling family plots, crooked tombstones leaning from decades of weather, and ornate mausoleums that looked more like miniature cathedrals than burial sites. At night, it had this heavy silence, the kind that made you hear your own footsteps a little too clearly. Most nights followed the same routine. I'd walk the gravel paths with my flashlight, check the perimeter fence, and make sure no one was trespassing. Teenagers like to sneak in sometimes, especially around Halloween. They'd leave behind beer cans, cigarette butts, or broken pieces of Ouija boards. It was annoying, but nothing I couldn't handle. But one night in late October, something was different. The air had that bite to it, cold enough to see your breath, and the wind carried the smell of damp leaves and soil. I was walking my usual path when I noticed something strange. A figure standing perfectly still near one of the larger mausoleums on the east side. At first, I thought it was just a statue. Plenty of the older graves had them. Angels, saints, mourning women carved in stone. But when my flashlight beam hit the figure, I realized it wasn't stone at all. It was a man. He was dressed in a black suit, the kind you'd expect to see at a funeral, but it looked wrong. The fabric was worn, discolored, like it had been sitting in a closet for decades. He stood there with his head slightly bowed, hands clasped in front of him, as if he were attending some kind of eternal service. I called out, thinking maybe he was a mourner who had stayed late. "Sir, the cemetery's closed for the night." No response, not even a twitch. I got closer, 30 feet away now, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach knot. His shoes weren't touching the ground. They hovered an inch above the grass. My flashlight flickered. For a second, the light cut out completely, leaving me in pitch darkness. When it came back on, the man's head was raised, and that's when I saw his face. His skin was pale, stretched thin like parchment. His jaw was too sharp, his cheekbones too high, and his eyes were completely black, not dark brown, not shadowed. Black, like holes had been punched straight through him. Then he smiled. It wasn't a wide grin, just a small, knowing smile that chilled me more than if he had lunged at me. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, but not in front of me, behind me. Slow, deliberate steps crunching against the gravel path, moving closer. I spun around with my flashlight, but the path was empty. Nothing but the rows of headstones stretching into the darkness. My hands were shaking so badly, the beam of light wobbled across the graves. When I turned back, the man was gone. The space near the mausoleum was empty, the grass undisturbed. For a second, I thought I had imagined it all, until I noticed something on the ground where he had been standing. The grass was blackened, not burned, not scorched, just dead. A perfect outline of two shoes frozen into the earth. I ran. I didn't stop until I was inside the caretaker's shed by the gate. The door locked behind me. I sat there for nearly an hour, too scared to even peek out the window. The next morning, when I finally got the courage to go back, the blackened patches of grass were still there. I quit that job a week later. But even now, I sometimes dream about that smile. And every time I wake up, I can't shake the feeling that one night I'll see him again, waiting by another grave, in another cemetery, watching. Back when I was in college, a couple of friends and I used to hang out at this old cemetery just outside of town. It sounds weird, I know, but it was one of those places everyone swore was haunted. The kind of spot people dared each other to visit at night. It wasn't a huge graveyard, more like a small family plot that had expanded over the years, but it was old. Some of the stones dated back to the 1800s, their inscriptions so faded you could barely read them. The grass was always overgrown, and there was a rusted iron gate that squealed whenever you pushed it open. People in town called it Hollow Creek Cemetery, though no creek had run through there in decades. One Saturday night, just before Halloween, my friends convinced me to go with them. There were 4 of us: me, Tyler, Chris, and Hannah. We brought flashlights, parked on the side of the road, and climbed over the gate since it was locked after sunset. At first, it was all fun. We were laughing, cracking jokes, daring each other to go touch the oldest gravestones. Tyler even tried to spook us by hiding behind a marker and jumping out. It worked the first time, but by the second, we were rolling our eyes. But that all stopped the moment Hannah pointed toward the far end of the cemetery. "Hey," she whispered, "do you see that?" At the edge of the plot, just past a leaning oak tree, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16, wearing a long white dress that almost shimmered under the moonlight. Her hair was dark, hanging in loose curls, and she stood perfectly still with her back to us. We froze. None of us had heard anyone else come in, and she wasn't carrying a flashlight. Chris called out first, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. We looked at each other, uneasy, but curious. Maybe she was lost, or maybe someone was pulling a prank. We started toward her, slow at first, then a little faster when we realized she hadn't moved an inch. The closer we got, the colder the air felt. At first, I thought it was just the night breeze, but it got sharp, like walking into a freezer. My breath puffed in front of me, and the silence around us grew thick. Even the crickets had gone quiet. When we were maybe 20 feet away, the girl finally moved. She turned her head, not quickly, not like a person would. It was deliberate, slow, as though her neck were creaking on rusty hinges. When her face came into view, my stomach dropped. Her eyes were hollow, not shadowed, empty, black sockets where eyes should have been. Her skin was pale, her lips bloodless, and her mouth was open just enough to look wrong. like it was about to stretch wider. Hannah grabbed my arm and whispered, "We need to go." But Chris stepped forward instead, trying to play it cool. "Look, whoever you are, this isn't funny." That's when she smiled. Not with joy. Not like she'd been waiting for us. It was a slow curl of the lips. Too sharp, too forced. Like her face wasn't built to smile, but was trying anyway. Then her mouth stretched wider. Wider than it should have. Her jaw seemed to unhinge, opening far past what was humanly possible. And then she screamed. The sound tore through the cemetery like glass shattering inside my skull. It was so loud, it rattled my chest. But her body didn't move. Her chest didn't rise. Her throat didn't strain. The scream didn't even come from her. It came from everywhere. From the trees, from the ground, from inside my own head. We panicked. Tyler and Hannah bolted immediately, but Chris froze. He was staring at her, like he couldn't move. I had to grab his jacket and drag him back toward the gate. As we ran, I made the mistake of looking back. The girl was closer now. She hadn't walked. She hadn't moved at all. But somehow, she was standing halfway between us and the oak tree, still staring, still screaming. We didn't stop until we were back at the car, slamming the doors shut and fumbling with the keys. The second the engine roared to life, the scream cut off. Just like that. Silence. None of us spoke on the drive back to campus. Not a word. The next morning, Hannah swore she heard knocking on her dorm window at 3 a.m. on the 4th floor. Tyler refused to hang out with us for weeks. And Chris? Well, Chris never admitted it, but I know he saw her again. I caught him staring out the window of our apartment one night, pale as a sheet. And when I asked what was wrong, all he said was, she was standing by the oak tree again. If these cemetery stories gave you chills, imagine what else is out there waiting in the dark. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next real-life horror story we bring to light. And if you've ever experienced something unexplainable, drop a comment below. Your story could be featured in a future video. Remember, some nightmares are waiting for you, even after the video ends.